Hey guys, Dan here with this week's TV news and reviews. We've got 6 shows for you on the docket. 3 of them are included in the new FX on Hulu sort of group branding, where they're taking shows from either FX or FXX or just simply FX Productions and putting them on Hulu either the day after or just skipping linear television completely and premiering on Hulu. So we actually have one of each. We have one that premiered on Hulu, one that's from FX, and one that's from FXX. But all of them are available on Hulu, at least from the episodes that have aired so far. So we've got that. We've got Hunters, the very talked about show with Al Pacino on Amazon Prime, and then we've got a couple other interesting shows as well. One from AMC and Jason Segel's return to television, and then a sort of, I don't know what you'd call it, self-help show, maybe self-help comedy show, called It's Personal with Amy Hoggart, and that is on truTV. So we've got those 6 shows to talk about, but first let's talk about the news. Most of what I'm going to talk about is coronavirus stuff. So before we get to that, let's talk about some smaller things going on. One is the Conners. We'll have special guests Sharon and Ozzy Osbourne on this week's episode. That was just announced. So I'll be bringing you the review for that as long as it airs, as it's supposed to, this coming Tuesday. They will be playing themselves. I don't know in what capacity yet, but we've already got sort of a crammed guest star slate on the Conners because Jennifer Grey will be returning, as well as what's his face that plays on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. They were both on. They were playing a married couple that wanted to be a throuple with Jackie on the last episode, which was from a couple weeks ago. So they're all going to be part of that, and the Osbournes as well. So that will be interesting. Stunt casting is a little bit hit or miss, especially a show like The Conners where there's already, such a big cast of people that, a lot of them don't even get their due all the time. But, if it's done well, then, I can say okay to that. But, like, the Dan Aykroyd one was horrible, they just had him playing poker, but that was part of ABC's, stunt casting week, cast from the past. But anyway, Clark Gregg is his name, right? And him and Jennifer Grey married in real life, which I thought was interesting. But anyway, they'll be returning to the Conners this week as well. So some stunt casting news there. Also, I wanted to talk about, this is something that actually I came up last week, but we were jam-packed with news stuff last week. We talked for about a half hour about the news. So I wanted to hit this item this week, and it's about Pop TV, who will be reviving One Day at a Time. In fact, is that on yet? I don't know. It's supposed to debut this month, I know that. But Schitt's Creek is leaving in April. That will be, getting off of there. Looks like One Day at a Time starts March 24th, so about a week away from that. But in the interim, they were supposed to premiere a handful of shows in the coming months, and they are not doing 3 of those. CBS has pulled them from their docket, and whether that means they're going to put them on CBS All Access or something else remains to be seen. None of them are from CBS Viacom Productions. One's from Lionsgate, one is from A&E Studios, and one is from Hat Trick Productions. So in the contract, all 3 of those studios can take the shows elsewhere, so we may see them pop up on a streamer or a different network, and those shows were called Florida Girls, Flack, and Best Intentions. One of them already aired a first season, and that's Flack. I was not familiar with the show, but it was supposed to air its second season today, actually, I think, but it was pushed back, just about a week ago. So, I assume at least half of the season, if not all the season, has already been filmed. So now they're just kind of sitting on it, wondering what to do. CBS is doing what a lot of the companies are doing now and trying to get more linear product on their airwaves. So basically, unless CBS or Viacom is going to produce it, they don't want anything to do with it, I guess. The one exception being One Day at a Time, which is Sony owned, but also Mother Mary, which is a pilot that was for Pop with Rachel Bloom from Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. That is still in production, and if CBS likes it, I guess they can put it on Pop, but it will be more linear in that way since they own the network. So that's the way a lot of these places are going now, especially with everybody having their own streamer. NBC's got the Peacock, and ABC obviously owned by Disney, so they've got Disney Plus and all that other stuff. And then CBS has All Access. Even Fox, well, they're owned now by Disney as well, so it's like they have the the ability to put it on Fox or FX or Hulu, like I just kind of mentioned at the top. So it's kind of sad for these three shows that put time and energy into making the product, only to find it sort of up in the air if it's ever going to air anywhere. So, but speaking of which, that leads me to the big coronavirus news and how it's affecting television. Obviously, this thing is declared a state of emergency now. Schools are off for a couple of weeks all over the country. Not in every single state, but my home state of Pennsylvania, that was announced this morning that yes, for the next 2 weeks, everybody will be off of school. A lot of places are closing, businesses closing for a little bit. But in the entertainment industry, it's just everyone is sort of making a run for it. The NBA has postponed the season. NHL has postponed the season. Major League Baseball, I think, is still on track, but they're going to start like 2 weeks late. So they're still going to do a season. But, as this thing progresses, who knows how it's going to continue to affect things. In the movie business, it's obviously taken a big toll. If you haven't heard, all those shufflings around, No Time to Die, the James Bond movie, is now going to be in November instead of April, and they've moved Mulan, and they've moved Fast and Furious 9, and all of this. So, but how does it affect the television industry? Well, any show that is currently in production with a live audience has pretty much halted production or have gone and done shows without a studio audience. Most of the late night shows, included in that, The Tonight Show, Late Night with Seth Meyers, they both ran the last couple of shows this week with no studio audience, and then they're going to do a week, I guess, of reruns, and then they had a planned week off anyway at the end of March, so that's going to kind of lead into that. The View went live the other day with no studio audience. Jimmy Kimmel is going to have no studio audience, and then just start doing reruns next week. And same with like the cable talk shows as well. Late Night with Daily Show with Trevor Noah, the Samantha Bee Show, Bill Maher, John Oliver. All of those after this week are going to be going dark, and it's bled into your network shows as well for prime time and things like that. And along with those talk shows, by the way, Kelly Clarkson Show, Ellen, Tamron Hall, all of the talk shows, either have stopped production entirely or have run the last couple episodes with no audience. And then same with Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy. They had the contestants come out, but have run with no audience. Now they shoot a bit early, so that's going to be probably ones that we won't see for a few weeks. But still, yeah, they've decided to continue shooting, but not with a studio audience. So all of the, I shouldn't say all, but like 80 to 90% of all network shows that are still in production have been either postponed or halted entirely, and just that's it for the season. Maybe they had 2 episodes left to film. Well, it's done now for the season. We'll start back up next year. Things like Hawaii Five-0, for example. Okay, well that's already announced. Its last season was this season. So they already filmed their final episode. So, no worries there. That is going to get a proper send-off. And most of CBS's studio audience sitcoms have already done, filming their season. except for The Neighborhood, which has one episode left, and they will film it, but not in front of an audience. They'll just, put the laugh track in, which, shows like that always kind of sweeten the laughs anyway from the audience. So, but, NBC has halted production on 35 of its shows, or produced shows, which includes, things like the Kelly Clarkson Show and the Tonight Show, but, all the Chicago drama shows, what else? All their comedies. Any show. I think all the soap operas have been halted. I don't know if NBC still has any, but I know like General Hospital over on ABC is done. Grey's Anatomy is done, and even some of the streaming shows. Apple TV has halted production on all of its shows. Netflix has halted production on Grace and Frankie in its final season. And what's interesting about the streamers is they're sort of beholden to no schedule. They can put shows up whenever they want. Like Russian Doll, okay, they've announced a release date for season 2, but now that is halted production. So okay, fine, we will do it another month or whatever. It sort of doesn't really affect them as much as it does the major networks, because they have airtime to fill. So, and in this day and age where you don't play a ton of reruns, what do? They're going to have to play a ton of reruns, or maybe, run shows that they weren't planning on running, like a show that maybe they filmed 10 episodes for, and not all of them have aired because it didn't, do that well. Like Sunnyside, for example. They decided to run out Sunnyside on the web. Well, maybe now they'll air the other 8 episodes of Sunnyside or whatever. So I don't know. It's going to be an interesting time. I mean, it harkens kind of back to, I think was it 12 years ago, the last writer's strike, where, a lot of the seasons were curtailed because the writers went on strike, like, around this time, if you're February or March. And they just didn't have the output, so, a lot of shows just, talk shows sort of were at a loss. I remember Conan, had a sort of fake rivalry with, like Jon Stewart and David Letterman, and Jimmy Kimmel, and they would all sort of like come on each other's shows just because they had no writing staff. So I don't know if it's going to get to that point. I think if nothing else, you'll just get like the shows without the audiences, like the Tonight Show did for a couple episodes this week. But it's certainly very odd, how this is going to affect things. Because back then, when the writer's strike happened, networks would just buy up, game shows or reality shows, and okay, we'll just, deal or no deal, 4 days a week. They can't really do that if the product isn't already there. So, maybe, the fears will only last a few weeks here. Maybe with everybody sort of holding off on things, the coronavirus will sort of settle itself down, and maybe we will only, go dark here for a few weeks. But I mean, Broadway's going dark for 30 days. Disney World and Disneyland are closed till the end of March, if not longer. I mean, at the end of March, obviously, they'll look at what's going on and see. And I'm sure a lot of these TV shows are doing the same. But yeah, if your favorite show had not yet finished filming its season, it is very, very likely that whatever episodes they've already got in the can, that is it for the season. Which also means, I don't know what that means for May sweeps, because May sweeps is when, the networks trot out their big name shows and all their season finales to get more viewers. So what, do they just do a month of reruns until then and hold off on those last couple of ones that they've produced until May? I don't know. So we'll see what happens as this continues to shape. But yeah, most of the network shows and even cable and streaming, most of the shows currently in production are being halted. And if they haven't been already, my guess is they will be. Over the next few days, just because that's the way things are going. So, all very interesting. But let's talk about some shows that are already out and already have episodes in the can, and you can watch them. The first one is Hunters. This is on Amazon Prime. And I believe this is one of the ones where all the episodes are up already. Yep, they put all 10 up that first day, which Amazon usually does. But this is Al Pacino's first foray into, you know, not network television, but regular television. He's done a few HBO movies. He's done a couple of things here or there, guest wise. But to have a regular role on a regular show, that does not happen very often. But Logan Lerman is also, I would say, like the real star. Al Pacino is definitely in it, and he has an important role, and he's sort of the face of all the promotions, but he is not the star of the show. It's Logan Lerman from, among other things, The Perks of Being a Wallflower. But apparently, in the 70s in New York City, there were a handful of Nazi hunters, because even though, we won World War II, there were still Nazis around, as very, very sadly there still are today. And this is not particularly about one real family or real case, but just sort of, an amalgamation of Nazi hunters, that were around at that time. So Logan Lerman plays Jonah Heidelbaum, who is, a gifted young kid. He's a, math whiz, and his grandmother dies in early on in the first episode, and at her Shiva, he meets Al Pacino's character, who is Meyer Offerman, who sort of plays himself off as a Jewish philanthropist. Oh yes, I knew your grandmother. We were in the Holocaust together. This and that and the other thing. So as we sort of unfold things, by the end of the first episode, we learn all about the Nazi hunters. We learn who Al Pacino's character really is. We learn who the grandmother really was in relation to him. And of course I don't like to do spoilers on this channel, so that's all I'll really say for now. But the first episode is a two-parter, so it really is, it's sort of the first two episodes, if you will, but it's all, under the guise of one episode. So really there's, I don't know if there's 10 then or 11 episodes, I'm not sure, but yeah, I don't know. But it's an hour and a half that I watch anyway. I don't know whether that counts as one episode or two to Amazon, but I really thought this was cool. I didn't know much about the subject matter. I didn't know that these were sort of real groups that went around. And the best thing about it for me was that I thought Al Pacino did not do that good a job in The Irishman. And I know he was nominated for an Academy Award for that. To me, it felt like he was doing a caricature of Al Pacino. Like, I felt like he was doing Bill Hader's impression of Al Pacino. Excuse me. Here, he really is giving a great performance, and it's not phoned in. Excuse me. It's not, I just felt The Irishman was like everything else he's done, recently. But here, and granted, I haven't seen a ton of Al Pacino stuff, but I've seen some of the classics. I've seen And Justice for All, and of course his turn as in Jack and Jill, the Adam Sandler classic. But I've seen a little bit of his gangster stuff along the way. But this was something wholly different, I think, for him, at least in his recent years. And I thought he did a great job sort of giving us the mystery of this character at first, and then once the layers are sort of starting to peel back, he really lets us have the full, hey, I'm Meyer Offerman, this is the character, boom, like, let's do this. And you're really, you're rooting for them because they're the good guys, but there's, a lot of twists and turns. And obviously nobody's gonna say, oh, well, they're not the good guys. He survived the Holocaust and everything, but there's certainly more layers to it than that, and I like that. Logan Lerman, I've liked him from way, way back in the day. He was on this TV show called Jack and Bobby on it was probably before it was even the CW. It was probably on the WB. but he did Percy Jackson, and and I love Perks of Being a Wallflower. It was one of my favorite movies of the last decade. So I'm definitely a fan of his, and he's great here too. And like I said, even though Al Pacino's front and center on all the promotional stuff, Logan Lerman is definitely the star of this show, and he really comes across very well as this smart Jewish kid who is sort of finding his own way for who he is. I mean, he's in high school. He's really smart. He's very faithful to his grandmother and taking care of her and everything. But at the same time, he's sort of back and forth on like what it means to be Jewish and all of this, and then he finds this stuff out. I think he's a bit hesitant at first, but he's all in, and I think he plays that balance very well of like, okay, this is good, right? But do I want to do this? I definitely want to avenge my grandmother. I want to, her death was mysterious. I want to figure that out. And so he ends up, choosing pretty quickly to kind of go all in on it. And I don't know. He just plays it very well. I think he's a very good actor and does not get the credit he deserves. And that's not just from the Perks of Being a Wallflower. That's from a lot of TV and movie roles that I've seen him in over the years. Also, I really like the set design in this show. It's from the 70s, and it looks very authentic to New York City in the 70s. I think Amazon has thrown a lot of money into this show. This might be their first new show of the year. I think maybe I did one other Amazon show so far in 2020, but I think it was like a kid's show. I think it was that Just Add Magic, Emerald City, or whatever the heck it was called. I think so this is like the first adult, series that they're going after so far this year. So they're obviously putting a lot of money into it. The score is really cool. The set design is cool. And I'm definitely on board for what is possibly going to happen, in the rest of the season. I will say, I mean, it may make some light of the Holocaust. It may make some light of Nazis, or concentration camps, or that kind of thing. Which obviously is a very serious subject. So I'm not sure. I mean, if I were Jewish, I'm not sure how that would affect me. Because not that it's like a comedy show. It's not Jojo Rabbit here, but I think maybe it makes a little light of some of that stuff in turning these Nazi hunters into like superheroes kind of thing. But yeah, I thought this was very enjoyable. I leave Hunters on Amazon with a B+. So we're gonna go next to another real biggie. This is on AMC, and AMC sort of losing some of their big shows. Better Call Saul's entering its last season, but Dispatches from Elsewhere is the name of it, and Jason Segel is returning not only to TV but just to acting in general. I mean, he hasn't been in anything for about 5 years. The End of the Tour was his last movie, which was, it was like an indie film. It was very good, but, not very much seen. So, I don't know if he's been throwing his hand into producing or what, but he does executive produce this, and he actually created it too, based on a documentary film called The Institute. So it's weird to me that this is based on a documentary, because it is really messed up and like out there, and but the documentary, I didn't see it, but I guess the documentary sort of was more like this is how they ran this like thing in San Francisco where there was like an alternate reality game that they put on, and they had 10,000 people in it, or at least that had shown interest in it, and so it's a documentary about that. So it takes that sort of concept and you don't really know what it is. You don't know if it's a virtual reality game. You don't know if it's, some sort of hoax, or if it's actually real. Like, we as the audience don't know, and they don't know either, at least not in the first episode. And this has a pretty decent cast. I mean, Jason Segel stars in it, but you've got Richard E. Grant as like the leader of the program, the Jejun Institute, as they're calling it. And I loved him in the movie Can You Forgive Me a couple of years ago, but he's been around for decades. And then Sally Field is in it as well as one of the participants. Always love her. And then Andre Benjamin, who is Andre 3000 from Outcast, who has been a bit hit or miss on his acting roles, I think, but he plays like this genius here that got like a 1590 on his SATs, and so, he's part of the, I don't know if you want to call it a game or whatever, but he's part of it as well. And then this newcomer, Eve Lindley, plays Simone, who is a trans woman who is also, part of the, I guess I'll call it a game for all intents and purposes, but we don't know what it is yet, and I don't know that we'll find out anytime soon, because I don't think it's billed as a limited series. It's billed as an anthology series, which to me, anthology can mean two things. It can mean different actors in each episode of different storylines, like a Twilight Zone type thing, or it can mean different actors or different characters in each season, like American Horror Story. So this would seem to be the latter, because I think all of these people are going to be in this entire season. And then I guess if it gets renewed, then there will be different actors, or maybe Jason Segel will remain and other people will join him. Who knows? But for now we have this, and they're airing episodes weekly. So far they've only had 3 episodes come on, but I believe there's 9 scheduled. There's 10 scheduled, and it goes through the end of April. Basically, Jason Segel is this guy Peter who is living a very ordinary life. Every day is the same, but he starts seeing these mysterious flyers popping up all around town. That say things like, communicate with dolphins. It's one of those things on a telephone pole where you have the little pull tabs. And then the next day he comes back and sees, a different one about, putting your memories onto a hard drive so you can watch them, and so eventually he decides to take one and, enter this sort of weird, maze sort of thing. It reminded me a little bit of Get Out, actually, at the end where he's in the basement. But everything about this show is just pretty unorthodox, from the score to the set pieces to just the way the characters are handled and their interactions, because they don't know what's going on. But for example, the very beginning of the show, it's Richard E. Grant just sitting in a chair for 20 seconds, not talking. He's blinking, so okay, well, my TV's not frozen. But then he starts talking, and he's like, okay, now that I've got your attention, I'm going to fill you in on this guy Peter, and avoid the 20 minutes, that most shows do of, building him up and seeing about his life and da-da-da-da-da. Here's the skinny on Peter, X, Y, and Z. So from the very beginning, it's a completely unique approach to storytelling that I really liked. It definitely caught me off guard. And I'm definitely confused as to what's happening, which you're supposed to be. And I love shows like this. I mean, Lost was the first drama of that type I really got into. I never watched Twin Peaks when that was out. I mean, X-Files, yeah, but that's pretty much a straight-ahead sci-fi show. Whereas this, you don't really know quite what it is yet. So I found that intriguing. The only thing I didn't really love about at least the first episode is once we meet Simone, she kind of comes in as some comic relief. And I get it, you want some comic relief. Lost had Hurley. But at the same time, we don't always have to have comic relief. I mean, everything doesn't always have to be very serious either. But these people are real confused as to what's going on, and by the time they all sit down at the diner, with Sally Field and Andre 3000 and Jason Segel, and they're all kind of talking, there's some humor lines that sort of didn't hit for me, just because I'm like, okay, I'm not trying to lose focus on the storyline here, because the storyline seems to be very, very unique and interesting. We've certainly had the idea before of like, is this a game or is this reality or blah blah blah? But they're presenting it in a very unique way here. So I really enjoyed this show. I would like to see it be a little more serious, but for what it is, I very much enjoyed Dispatches from Elsewhere. That one gets an A- from me. So now we're going to talk about 3 of the FX on Hulu shows. And the first one is the one that's airing currently on FX, and then starting on Hulu the next day you can catch it. And this is called Breeders. It's a half-hour comedy, and it's from England. It's like an England/America, co-production, but it stars Martin Freeman from the Hobbit movies and Fargo and many other things. And basically, it's him and his wife, who's played by Daisy Haggard. They play Paul and Allie, who have a young son, a young daughter, and they're struggling through parenthood. They're struggling with how to deal with their kids. They're tired all the time. So it's nothing we have not seen before. As recently, I guess, in Up All Night with Will Arnett and Christina Applegate. They had a baby. These kids were a little bit older, but it's all very like, okay, parenting is hard, and babies are terrible, and kids are terrible, and we love them because we love them, but like they're annoying and da 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 da. So it's plot wise and storyline, it's just not treading on anything new. However, Martin Freeman is, I think, a very versatile actor. I don't think he quite gets the credit he deserves, because he can be very serious. Fargo was the thing that really turned me on him, because I loved him in the Hobbit movies, but I didn't know much else, from him. And then when I saw, I think it was that first season of Fargo he was in, I was like, oh, this dude can like really act. And then I saw him host SNL, and I was like, okay, now he can be funny too. He is very funny in this, and they have very good chemistry. They have, you can believe that they're parents. There's some good jokes. He's really, dragging and tired all the time, and there's two guys fighting outside their place. So he goes and tells them he's gonna straight up murder them if they don't shut the hell up. And so now it airs on FX, and I don't know if it's bleeped or not, because there's a lot of language, and I know you can say some things on cable and some things you can't, and some of the FX shows have dropped like 1 or 2 F-bombs sporadically, but this is clearly like, it was probably aired on the BBC first and then came over here. The version I saw was on Hulu, and it was not edited, but I would imagine that FX edits it a bit for language. I don't know, but that would be my guess. But other than that, I mean, the storyline is pretty stale, but their chemistry and their humor with it, sort of pushes it over that edge for me. And I think it's actually a pretty funny show. I kind of liked that Up All Night show with Will Arnett and Christine Applegate, but then they had like Maya Rudolph coming in as like an Oprah type, and that sort of threw the whole chemistry off of everybody. This is very much focused on the family unit only, at least, for now. Maybe in subsequent episodes it'll be different, but yeah, I liked Breeders. I give it a B, and you can catch that on FX. So the next one is the other new comedy that they have, and this one's on FXX, and again on Hulu the next day. And here's another one. It's got a lot of foul language, so I don't know if it's edited on television and then unedited on Hulu or not. It's hard to say, but this is basically created by and starring the rapper known as Lil Dicky from out of Philly, who I first became familiar with because my ex was like super into him, and he does like comedy rap basically, straight down to the name Lil Dicky, about how he has a small penis, ha ha ha. But he had this really creative song with Snoop Dogg, back maybe like a year and a half ago, where like he goes to Snoop Dogg to like ask for advice, and Snoop's like, "What, you're a terrible rapper. What are you talking about?" Blah blah blah. So this show takes that persona, the Lil Dicky persona, and basically makes it into a show. And his real name is Dave, and so that's also the real name of his character. Dave Bird is the guy's name, but he goes by Lil Dicky. But he goes by Dave on the show, who is an aspiring rapper named Lil Dicky. So it's sort of semi-autobiographical in the episodes or Curb Your Enthusiasm type of way, but it's just very silly and juvenile and not necessarily in a good way. I found the plot interesting for the first episode. He's struggling to get this career going, but he's also like sending sort of dirty tweets out about his girlfriend, and his girlfriend gets offended, and he's like, "Oh, well, that's not, me sending that out, that's Lil Dicky, da 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 da." And she's like, "Right, but like my mom follows you on Twitter, so, you can't be saying that stuff," So there's like some dynamic there, and then he's trying to get this rapper YG to record a verse for him, and he pays him $10,000, and then YG kind of skedaddles with the money, so like they're trying to track him down. Like plot wise, it was actually pretty interesting. I thought it had a more interesting plot than it was a funny show. The laughs were sporadic at best, I would say. But he does sort of play the persona pretty well. Like, he's not a bad actor. I mean, most rappers I feel like are pretty good actors, because rapping is just sort of like acting in a way on stage or whatever with your verses. But I don't think he's that likable a character, though. Like, he's a decent actor, and he's kind of funny when he's not being completely juvenile and stupid. Like, I think his fans will like this, and I think they'll think it's a riot. If you're not into hip hop and you're not into sort of poking fun at hip hop, I guess, whilst being into it, I don't know if you'll get much out of it. Also, I think the whole concept is very reminiscent of another FX show called Atlanta, which I don't know how autobiographical that is, but it's with Donald Glover, and he's got a rap alter ego with Childish Gambino. So I don't know how much how realistic that is to his life, but this is supposed to be sort of semi-autobiographical, but like in a funny way. It seems like it's kind of biting off Atlanta, but also is sort of a parody of Atlanta, which doesn't always work. But again, I liked the plot of the show. For a comedy, I didn't laugh very much, and I thought, I think he is an unlikable lead, for the show. Good actor, lousy character, though. Which maybe I could say about his rapping, too. I don't know. I mean, I thought the song he did with Snoop Dogg was kind of funny, the first few times. But, so, yeah, I'm a little bit torn on Dave. I'm going to leave it with a C+. And then next up is the show that's exclusively on Hulu. It's FX produced, but it is only on Hulu, and that is called Devs. This is a thriller, and it's being billed as a miniseries, so it will likely not go past the first season. But anymore, if something hits and there's a way to expand the story, they will do that, like Apple TV Plus just did with Truth Be Told, the Octavia Spencer show. Supposed to be just a one-off miniseries, limited series, whatever you want to call it, and yet we're getting a second season of that. So it does happen sometimes that if something goes real well, they'll keep doing it. But for now, there's supposed to be 8 episodes of this, and Hulu typically releases their shows once a week. So that's what they're doing here. They released the first 2 on the same day, and then It'll be one a week after that. But basically, the plot of Devs is it's this sort of sci-fi futuristic tech company, and this gal Lily Chan, who is a computer engineer, gets caught up in this company called Amaya, and Nick Offerman plays the boss or the owner or the creator of Amaya, named Forrest, and he's got a whole sort of interesting procedure of even getting into the building. This thing is so top secret, but she gets her boyfriend involved with it as well, and in like halfway through the first episode, the boyfriend turns up missing. Now we as the audience know what happened to him because we see it on the screen, but she does not. But she thinks something fishy is going on. But of course she works there too, so she doesn't want to ruffle feathers. But at the same time, she feels like something very, very bad has happened to her boyfriend. So this is a very secretive company. So we don't quite know as the audience yet what the company is about yet. But we certainly did see what they did to her boyfriend, so we can at least gather that maybe they're the bad guys. So that's sort of the basic plot and what happens in the first episode. And I talked earlier about some of the set design for Hunters. The visual aspect of this show is completely striking, and it makes a lot of sense because this is a show from Alex Garland. Was it created by him as well? Yeah, created by, written, and directed by Alex Garland. If you're not familiar with the name, he wrote some novels in the 90s that were very successful, like The Beach, which turned into a DiCaprio movie. But more importantly, at least in the visual aspect of what I'm talking about, is that he directed Ex Machina and Annihilation, which are two of the best sci-fi movies of the last at least decade. I mean, if you have not seen either of those movies, especially Ex Machina, but Annihilation was also very good. Weirder. I mean, Ex Machina is weird too, but Annihilation's even weirder. But Devs has that same vibe of like really cool visuals meets a super interesting story that you can't quite wrap your head around for a little while. In the 8 episodes, I imagine things will unfold and we'll learn more as we go along. But visually, it's completely striking. Just the way they've used the different imagery of the corporation and just the room where all the workers are with the computers. It's like it's very minimal, but it's sort of got these like neon yellow lights. Like it's really cool to look at. And the same thing can be said about Ex Machina. And he also he didn't direct it, but I think he wrote the Judge Dredd movie they did a few years ago with Carl Urban, which also was very like stylized and less cartoony than the Stallone version of the 90s. So this guy really knows how to get a unique look going, but that's meaningless if it's not paired with a very compelling story. And here we have this very interesting mystery of what this company is and does, and how this gal is going to figure out, or not figure out maybe, what has happened to her man. It's very intriguing. It's similar to Dispatches from Elsewhere in the fact that you as the audience don't really quite know what's going on, and I always like that because I don't know, if you tip your hand too early, then I think the audience kind of loses interest. To go back to the X-Files for a second, it's like the truth is out there. Well, okay, so we saw certain things, but did we see them? I don't know. Depending on the episode, I guess. But like Mulder's like I believe. Scully's the skeptic. And that's why that show I think worked. And here we have the same thing. It's like Dispatches from Elsewhere. Each person has sort of a different theory, at the table of what is actually going on. And here, it takes it a step further because we see that okay, these guys are probably the bad guys because of what they did, but also, like, the dude was kind of trying to steal information, so maybe they're not, maybe they're just being protective, so it's like we don't quite know yet what's going on, and I like that about it. It's what I loved about Ex Machina too. The first half of the movie, I was like, what the hell's going on with this thing? And same with, Annihilation. I still didn't quite know what was happening by the end of the movie. I had to sort of read some things about it. But yeah, I love the style of this show. It's definitely interesting. Nick Offerman is so diverse in his characters, because Ron Swanson is a lot different from like a lot of the father type characters he plays in like indie movies, and here he plays this very, I don't want to say sinister yet because I think he is, but I'm not quite positive. And he looks completely different too. He's got like this long hair that totally like changes the shape of his face. It's an interesting performance from him too. I love the lead gal. I don't know her from really anything. Although I think she was like in both those. Yeah, she was in Ex Machina and Annihilation, but like she wasn't the star or anything. Although Ex Machina, I think maybe she was the woman. And well, anyway, I'm getting off on too many tangents. The point is, this is a very unique show, very cool. Part of me would like it to stay a miniseries, so it's sort of contained. But if it's, because I loved Lost, but by the end, it got, no pun intended, but lost in its own sort of mythos. So it might be nice to only have 8 episodes of this show and call it a day. But for now, I really, really like this. I'm excited to see where it goes from here. I give Devs an A. Best one of the week for me, and pretty good week so far. But let's get to It's Personal with Amy Hoggart on truTV, because I'll tell you right now, this is my least favorite of the week. I'm not familiar with Amy Hoggart. In fact, I didn't even know how to pronounce her name until she pronounced it in the episode. But this is sort of, it's a comedy series, but it's not like a sketch series. It's not a sitcom. It's sort of like a self-help series, I guess. The basic premise is she, is helping people with an issue they have, and she does it, with her humor and stuff, and, tries different things. So I ended up watching 2 episodes of this, because a show like this, I feel like one episode doesn't necessarily give you a good enough vibe of like what the show's all about, or what the host is all about. So the first one I watched is called Humor, and it's this woman who is a business executive that has no real sense of humor. Like, she can find things funny, but she herself is not funny at all. She tries to tell a joke, it falls completely flat. So Amy takes her under her wing, and they go to a humor in business like seminar. She does focus groups, and then she like workshops a couple different stories with this woman till we get to one that she could tell at a dinner party for her colleagues that may make her look, a little bit more approachable at work. So that was episode 1. Episode 2 is called Miami. She meets up with this gal in Miami who is having all these like self-esteem and body issues, and she's like really pretty. So, we learn, oh, well, that's because Miami, only lets in 10s. Everybody here is hot. So, yes, of course you're going to have, some anxiety because you don't think you measure up to these other people. So she goes on a quest to sort of change the identity of Miami, and, make it more of a, like an ugly city by word of mouth kind of thing. This show is not that good. She's like okay, Amy Hoggart. Again, like, I wasn't familiar with her. I don't know her. I guess she's a stand-up or something, but I didn't know her. And she's kind of a little funny, but not what you need in a host. And also, these segments are really drawn out. I think she could tackle 2 issues per episode, because by the time, the 20-minute mark rolls around, you're just kind of bored with everything. You're like, okay, get to the point, either help this person or don't. Let's kind of move it along here. So I thought each episode was too long, and I think she's only an okay host. This is not a show I would watch again. I don't think this is a show I would recommend to people. If you know who Amy Hoggart is and you love her and you think she's a laugh riot, then okay, you'll probably enjoy this more than I did. But I thought the topics were interesting. It's sort of like a help me help you sort of thing. And some of the things she did were interesting. Like the focus group she does in the humor episode is she takes a bunch of twins, and then she pretends to be a twin herself and goes in as herself, and then goes in as her male twin to see if people find men or women generally more funny or more likable in a humorous way. And she proved that, at least from the sets of twins that she dealt with, that they found the male to be funnier with the same exact jokes. They put one twin with the girl and one twin with the boy. So that was like an interesting experiment. It wasn't funny though. And I think that's the point of this program, is to try and be funny. So, especially in the episode where we're working on somebody's humor. So, I find it to be kind of an annoying show, I guess, overall. I mean, it was sort of interesting, but not likable enough to recommend by any stretch. So I leave It's Personal with Amy Hoggart with an A, with a C minus. Oh my gosh, not an A, not an A. C minus for sure. So that's going to do it for this week. It'll be interesting to see in the weeks progressing with the coronavirus how networks are going to adapt to that, if we are going to have maybe a month or two where there aren't a lot of new shows happening, or for a lot of streaming services, they probably have a lot of episodes in the can already for some of their shows, but for a streamer like Netflix that puts every episode up, if the whole season's not complete, they're not going to put it up. So it'll be interesting in the coming weeks how this progresses. I would like to still be able to review 5 or 6 new shows a week, but we'll see if that happens or not. But for now, thanks so much for watching. Please comment below. Let me know if you've seen any of these shows. I always like to hear from you guys. And that's going to do it. We'll talk to you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye.